Hi guys, welcome to The Drop. I'm Maha. With me today I have Laaleen Sukhera. She's an author, a creative strategist, and now the country's first literary consultant. Hi Laaleen.
Hi Maha.
So Laaleen, you wear many hats. What are you working on at the moment?
So Maha, I have a media background. I've been a magazine editor, a journalist for many years. I've also been a television producer here in Pakistan as well as in the United States and Britain. I also consult in the communication sphere in branding and marketing. And what I've done recently is, as an author myself, I'm offering advisory services to other authors for writing, editing, as well as publishing and promoting their books.
Many of us have heard of the Jane Austen Society, which you founded. So can you tell us more about that?
So it's basically just a group of like-minded people. We're very fond of books and reading, of course, as the name implies. We have a thriving online community. There's around 3,000 people on our Facebook page. And we've had meetups in Lahore, Karachi, Islamabad, London. And that's all there is to it. We have like a cosplay sort of dress-up tea maybe once a year. And for some reason, people find that kind of fascinating. But it's honestly the same as like what people do for Star Wars and for Game of Thrones.
Absolutely. And we can still draw parallels between Austen's England, which was about 200 years back, and the current Pakistan. Why is that?
Well, I think you can answer this question as well as I can.
Yeah.
Why is it that, we're 21st century women, but why do we find it so relatable? Like customs in England 200 years ago, whereas people in England today do not necessarily find the same parallels.
Yes.
For us, the courtship rituals, the marriage market, all that is still very relevant, no matter how successful you are as a business executive, if you're female, or even if you're male.
You have to endure that,
Yeah, you have to make a very good marriage. Like you have to make a good match, or people in general think you haven't attained that level of success. So in addition to, of course, our shared history via colonialism and exports, the textile industry, the fashions, influence over fashions at the time, there's that as well, that element. But I feel that we grow up with British authors here in Pakistan because it's a Commonwealth country, and we feel a natural affinity for that world.
And writers often put pen to paper when they've gone through certain experiences. Would you say this happened to you when you were writing Austenistan?
Well, so I've got it with me.
Yeah.
It's a work of fiction entirely. It is not autobiographical. Okay. There are 7 stories by 7 wonderful women. One of them, myself, not calling myself wonderful,
but
it just happened that way. So basically I curated this, and we drew inspiration from Austen's works, from some of her novels, certain settings, characters, and scenes. So it is entirely fiction, correct. It is not, as you say, your own experiences drawn in. However, there's a lot of empathy, even though they're short stories and one can only go a certain depth with short stories. When you read it, you feel empathy towards some of the characters you would be surprised to feel empathy for. Like there's a character inspired by Mrs. Bennet, for example, and Lady Susan, and they turn out to be unlikely heroines. And our heroines in our book, they vary in age, they vary in marital status.
It's relatable.
Yeah, I hope so. But we wrote it for ourselves. We didn't really think who's going to appreciate it, who's going to relate to it. So we were pleasantly surprised.
And what I want to know is how you wrote, edited, and published this book within less than a year, actually, right?
Yeah, so actually, it's kind of a crazy story. We had a really strong concept.
Yeah.
And when word of that concept got out, because I'm not one for keeping secrets.
Yeah.
So I'm the kind of person who will announce something before I even do it. So the word got out, and there was a lot of interest, among agents and publishers. So before the manuscript was even ready, the offers were pouring in, which is unprecedented, and it was a delightful surprise. But I would say to budding authors out there, do not go by this example. We got very, very lucky, and we're very grateful. So between writing it, editing it, and publishing it, launching it, and then we embarked on a book tour. So it was all done in a year, which is insane.
Fantastic. That's amazing. Would you say your voice has it's helped women ignore these traditional taboos and sort of break from it and share their experiences. And also, what would you say to women who are silently struggling, you know?
Well, on a personal front, you know, I have experienced some difficulties in life. And a lot of times when I'm interviewed by people, especially, you know, in the Western Hemisphere, they tend to concentrate a lot on that as well as our book. So it's like there's a lot of overlapping between the two, which is kind of surreal. So you've asked about my voice. I've had to go public with certain things because I felt like I had reached my limit in terms of social hypocrisy and the way that we operate as a society. And I know that I'm relatively privileged and I don't have to worry about certain things like, nobody's judging me for my choices. Nobody's saying, oh, why did you decide, why are you getting a divorce, for example? And, I don't have that kind of thing. I have a lot of support in that way, but there's a lot of women who don't have that kind of support in this country. And I found that even with my so-called, wonderful education and socio-cultural background, socioeconomic background, I had the same struggles as every woman in this country because I went from court to court, struggling for custody and still struggling for adequate child support and struggling to get a divorce. Very, very basic rights. And those rights are very similar to what women 200 years ago, it's very similar.
Yes.
The similar kinds of circumstances, the way women were blackmailed at that time as well, emotionally blackmailed, financially blackmailed, physically. So there's a lot of things that I think are really important in our narrative, and I wanted to start this narrative, keep this narrative going, so people open up to this kind of discussion instead of just hiding.
Do you feel that it will ever change?
I've noticed that there's a lot of voices out there. I was part of a movement here called the Aurat March all over the country. And there were a lot of women and men and boys of different ages. And I feel a lot of hope, actually. There's a lot less inhibitions about things that are oppressive and cruel towards families. And when I say families, I mean women and children specifically, but also men. Everybody's struggling with all kinds of things, from abuse of in all forms, whether it's physical, emotional, whether it's financial, and struggling with toxic masculinity, struggling with all kinds of restrictions that are actually against the law, but they're not being implemented correctly. And I feel that there's a lot of dialogue now, and we just have to keep working towards it, and everyone has to go beyond armchair activism and play a part. And I hope to do the same. Whatever I manage to achieve in court, I hope that other families, other women and children can use it to further their own cases.
And final question, do you have any future goals that you want to share?
I have a very long bucket list.
Okay.
And one of the first few things on my bucket list I have already done in the last couple of years. One was publishing a book. And I've also tried to face my fears. One of these used to be being in front of a camera, because I've been behind a camera like most of my career. So now and I've done a bit of public speaking now as well. So I wouldn't say I'm better at it, but I would say I'm not terrified anymore.
Thanks for coming today, Laaleen. That's all for today. Stay tuned for next time. You are watching The Drop.